Videos like these are made possible by viewers like you, who support the channel through Patreon, channel memberships, and stream donations. Check the description for links to these and more. Now let's get into the video. Sniper secondaries. They're usually associated with either annoying backpacks that tell you exactly what class the sniper will call a slur, it's both of them for me, or some other weapon that's associated with a bodily excretion. But the one that most people seem to forget is the one that everyone starts off with, the SMG. I don't know if I'd really call this weapon underrated, since I generally see people speaking of it positively, but I'll absolutely call it underutilized, since anytime I see a sniper, it's almost always with a backpack or piss. There's also the carbine to be considered there, but let's be real, no one uses that thing and for good reason. So, why is the SMG so underutilized? Is it just a subpar secondary, or the supreme secondary? Well, let's find out. The SMG is very comparable to the pistol in terms of its damage output, functionality, and purpose. The biggest differences come in clip size, firing speed, and accuracy. The SMG has 25 bullets instead of 12, fires shots half a second faster than the pistol, and is generally more accurate. But while the overall damage of a full mag dump is similar, the damage of each individual shot is not. The pistol can deal 22 damage at max ramp up, while the SMG only deals 12. If there's any gun experts in the comments, I'd love to hear about any submachine gun that made it out of the factory being half as lethal as any given handgun shot for shot. The design philosophy behind this is pretty simple. You get twice as many shots, so you deal half as much damage for roughly the same experience with a much wider margin for error, which in part is made up for by the gun's higher accuracy. As far as a secondary weapon goes, this design makes a lot of sense. It's not at risk of overshadowing the sniper rifle in terms of damage output, and the automatic firing as opposed to being single fire means this weapon requires a different skill set, that being tracking, in order to use it properly. Now, in my video on the pistol, I mentioned that it was a fantastic secondary and a great utility for both classes who use it, but that was for those classes. Scout can get in close to take full advantage of the pistol's upsides, and the engineer is in pretty serious need of a backup tool in a lot of cases. How does that same rough design fare on Sniper, who most people interpret as being so self-sufficient with his rifle that he may as well not even equip a secondary weapon and opt for a shield instead? Well, I would say it fares just as well, if not better. Sniper is a very all-or-nothing class, arguably the most all-or-nothing class in the game. Other classes can rely on chip damage or splash damage, or are generally capable of spamming out their enemies, but not Sniper. Well, not unless you use the Huntsman. You're either going to be dealing no damage or a decent chunk of it, assuming your shot doesn't kill the enemy, but this all-or-nothing design can be what ends up robbing you of kills in a lot of situations. It's here that the SMG comes into play in its first big role, a finisher. Plenty of classes can tank a headshot and be left with not much health left afterwards. Pyros, demos, soldiers, and even vaccinator medics who fail to pop before their headshot all fall into this category. Depending on the situation you're in, another sniper rifle shot can either be too slow, too precise, or both for what you need in order to take that class out, and that's where the SMG shines. This can also apply to several overhealed classes, but unless you know for a fact that the medic is dead and can't go back to overhealing them, it's best not to waste your time and just go for another rifle shot. The chip damage the SMG provides even at long ranges can be exceptionally helpful when you know for a fact an enemy is seriously wounded, but it's no match for the healing rate of the mediguns. In any case, sometimes one bullet of chip damage will be all you need to finish off a target, especially depending on your weapon of choice. Machina users will get a lot of utility out of the SMGs, as it lets them finish off pyros and demos in a single shot after a fully charged body shot, and the same is true of fully charged Huntsman and Heatmaker body shots on light classes. Not to mention, when paired with the Sydney Sleeper, you can combo an initial shot applying Girardi to the enemy with a quick SMG volley to make up for the damage you could have been doing by using any other rifle more or less. Quickly switching to the SMG to save yourself time on an enemy about to round a corner, or just so you don't have to bother with a risky second follow-up shot, can land you quite a few kills that you otherwise would have missed out on, and that's a great utility for any sniper to have. And while the finisher aspect is especially nice for weapons like the Machina and Sydney Sleeper, it's with these same weapons where the second big use case for the SMG also comes into play: close range self-defense. Oftentimes, one of the reasons you might need to finish off an enemy in the first place is because they're coming at you after you've headshot them, but it wasn't enough to put them down and now your ass is on the line. If they're at more than 50 health especially, like a jacked up Islander Demo Knight or a backup soldier after a quickscope, this can be a death sentence to just about any sniper, since you can't just follow up on that with a no-scope. But with a quick switch and good tracking, you can put that threat down before it manages to reach you. And this applies to anything that gets too close for comfort. While Sniper can get kills in close range with his rifle, this is far from reliable and will usually end with your death in the majority of situations. Going for an SMG volley may not feel as satisfying as nailing an overconfident scout between the eyes when he's right in your face, but if you practice with it enough, it'll end up being a much more reliable method of fending off attackers. This also makes the SMG a great retreat tool. Its large clip and quick reload allows you to lay down a flurry of suppressive fire that, if it doesn't kill the enemy outright, will at least discourage them and let you get into a position of safety. It's worth noting that for some encounters, you'll need to make a judgment call on when it's better to use your SMG or your melee, and depending on how close the enemy has gotten to you, it'll probably be best to use your melee, especially for one very particular reason. Why? The position an enemy is in where they start to make you feel uncomfortable staying scoped in is up to you personally, but once they cross that threshold, that's when the SMG comes out. And if you want to lead in with a volley only to finish them off with your melee, that works out just fine. For some weapons that leave you vulnerable often, like the classic Sydney Sleeper or Machina, having an SMG by your side to cover for the weaknesses of your primary can be a near necessity. The Classic and Sydney Sleeper are much less useful for self-defense than any of the other sniper rifles, since they lack hard-hitting quickscopes altogether, meaning you can't pull off any of the close-range quickscopes that the other rifles can, and the Machina doesn't allow you to no-scope, leaving you extremely vulnerable anytime you want to take a shot with it at all. I seriously cannot imagine running the Classic especially without using an SMG as a backup tool. In that aspect, I find that it's extremely similar to the Engineer's pistol, and in some cases kind of the Medic's syringe gun. Except the SMG is actually, good. The Hitman's Heatmaker's decreased body shot damage can also leave you more vulnerable against targets like Demo Knights and Soldiers, who you might be able to save yourself from with a harder hitting quickscope, and the SMG covers all of these weaknesses perfectly, while still giving you full visibility of your surroundings and full movement capabilities. The usefulness of which can't be understated for a class as vulnerable and largely immobile as Sniper. And of course, since you have full visibility and full mobility, that gives you one more avenue for making the absolute most of your SMG. Sheer, impractical, unadulterated, utterly stupid aggression. Now let's be clear that using the SMG as a DPS weapon is kind of stupid, but that isn't always the case. Being the aggressor with the SMG can be very viable. For example, against buildings like sentries, a fully charged rifle shot will do 150 damage. Not enough to take it down, and not enough for a second uncharged shot to do the job either, but more than enough to let the SMG finish it off well outside of the sentry's range thanks to its higher accuracy compared to the pistols. Comboing a rifle shot into an SMG volley is a great way to take down buildings quickly and easily, plenty of times before the engineer can even react, and an uncharged shot to an SMG volley can even be quite useful where mini sentries are concerned. This is also the case against players. A no-scope will deal up to 50 damage depending on your rifle, which is a hefty chunk of damage depending on the class you're fighting. After you manage to hit that, You simply skip over the slow reload animation of the rifle by switching to the SMG and pumping the enemy full of bullets. And if they're still alive by the time you've mag dumped them, then just switch back to your rifle and finish the job. I know that you can't do this with the Machina, but that's just another reason why I never use that thing. And if you want to go full lobotomized monkey brain, then simply holding down the fire button on an enemy while you walk at them as aggressively as your spindly legs will allow you to, will deal a fairly effective amount of damage and can land you some unexpected kills. The higher clip size compared to the pistol means you're not going to be able to mag dump as fast as a scout can, or keep up with your enemies to nearly the same degree, but the damage doesn't lie, and it can be the difference maker in a game where you're the only one left to make a push. Keep in mind, this won't always work. In fact, most of the time, it probably won't. Without some kind of advantage, you're just outclassed in terms of damage by most enemies in the game. Hell, even most enemies using a similar style of weapon. Which is why it's better off after you've already dealt a chunk of damage to them, or at the very least, seen your teammates do the same. But going skinny heavy can certainly catch your enemies off guard, and there's no sweeter satisfaction than punishing an overconfident enemy who doesn't realize just what a punch the SMG can pack. In my eyes, the SMG is the perfect secondary weapon for the sniper, and I'm very glad we live in the timeline where this is the case and it's not the scout's primary weapon, because that would suck. In terms of its functionality, for as similar as it is to the pistols in terms of its abilities and damage output, the roles it excels in, I find, are actually the closest to the spy's revolver. Perhaps we're not so different after all. Except for the smell. For such a simple weapon design, and especially on such a simple class, it's incredibly versatile and plays well into snipers' strengths and weaknesses. It's great for finishing off injured enemies who you can't kill without charging up a shot. It's good for close-range self-defense without being so good that it invalidates snipers' close-range weakness without any risk or effort on the part of the sniper. And honestly, I just think it's the most fun to use. My personal sniper playstyle involves me walking forward when I start to get bored watching a choke, and taking myself to the fight instead of waiting for it to come to me. Yo, did he just walk up slowly and headshot the medic? And when I do that, and I find myself in just the right position to do so, I'm always more than happy to go crazy with them choppers.